Call meeting to order.
Trustee Brewer? Here. Trustee Carter?
Here.
Trustee Grant? Trustee Tate? Trustee Todd? And Trustee Zupan? Here.
And we'll start with the presentation.
All right, so a few meetings ago, I presented the trustees with a review of the cash reserve policy. So I guess we can kind of go through that one first. So we will go through the cash reserve policy first. So the cash reserve policy was basically created after we just got the sale of the land. We decided, so we're getting $1.3 million from the sale of the land. So we want to take a portion of that money and just kind of put it on in reserves for, you know, just to have it for future use in case that we ever get into a situation that we have to borrow money. So this kind of will alleviate us from borrowing money going forward. So kind of put something together, a short and a long-term goal. So if you flip over to the back of the page, we kind of list out each fund that we have. We also list out so the budget number that we have for the year, minus any transfers, and then what that net or that balance is of each fund. We have a percentage for the long-term goal, and then we have a percentage for the short-term goal, which is going to be this year. So, for example, 8.5% increase, 8.5% of the general fund, we'd like to put that in reserve for fiscal year 2018-19, which it comes out to $455,000. So if you add these numbers up across the board, across the different funds, out of the $1.3 million that we will get, we would like to save or put aside $808,000 for reserves. So any questions on that? So the balance of that 1.3, that difference, I'm sure that there'll be some changes. Not changes. I'm sure there'll be some repairs made, but I'm not sure to the extent of how much we will use of the balance. But there will. So we're not using the whole 1.3. Just want to put it out there. Only $808,000 of the $1.3 million. Any questions on anything?
Mayor, did you have any input into this, or was this strictly the Finance Committee that came up with this?
The 808,000, no, I had no input in that.
Off the top of my head, I know that the fire chief had been asking at the time that we did the budget itself, and then more recently had come forward again asking for funds for equipment that is at the end of its life, and has been asking for funds to replace that, and has been talking to other sources to get loaners in lieu of new equipment. So I was hoping, and I know that we as a group haven't had any conversations that I'm aware of about what to use any of the proceeds of the land for. And I certainly don't want to be out there spending it. It's not like you open the checkbook and start spending it. We need to set it aside and save it for a rainy day. But at the same time, too, we've got some needs that should be addressed. And I think that's one of them, and I think we should probably go back and look at the different items that the department heads had at the budget time that we couldn't address, and see if there are others like that that truly are more pressing and maybe we should consider looking at as part of something that we might want to spend with some of those dollars sooner rather than later.
It's funny you should mention that. Yesterday we had a department head meeting, and I instructed the department heads specifically what you just stated, that there are some things that each department needed that hadn't been taken care of over a lot of years. What you're talking about is the bunker gear for the fire department. He had talked about that, and at some point in the near future, we're going to amend the budget to add some of those things to the departments that we weren't able to add into the budget because the budget did not include the sale of the land. So those will be some of the things that will be added into it. The board will get a list to see what the department heads want, and that's why you didn't see the whole 1.3 mil taken out. So, because I asked to have some of that taken, put on the side, so some of the things that need to be done, we have infrastructure, we have buildings that need to be roofs, sidewalks, aprons at the fire department. It's a lot of different things that need to be done, and we weren't able to do that at this particular point in time. It was not added into the budget. So those things will be brought to the board. The list will be brought to the board as soon as they finish compiling that list. And some of the repairs, I can just say a few. I know that the doors at the gym and at the community center are ancient. They have to be repaired and things. Those are just some of the things. It's a list, and they talked about it, so I told the department heads to bring it back to me when they compile it. We can go over it, and then after they've gotten it pretty much tweaked out, I'll bring it to the board and let the board see exactly what they're talking about.
Right, so that'll be to the side. That, well, these are just reserves, so that doesn't count. This money here does not count towards that. That'll be totally separate, just so everybody knows.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now, we still can't hear you. Presentation, we're gonna put in, we still can't hear you. I'm sorry, I can't. The, 158,000 was, transferred from the water fund to the fire fund, right?
Okay.
So, then you put, well, whoever put on side, 51,000, you put in reserves. Now,
Okay.
it seems like to me it's already in the hole, but now we're gonna take some money out of reserves and put it in the fire fund?
So the money we're setting to the side, so right, you're right. So we're transferring money from the general fund or the water fund to support the fire fund. The 51,000 that we're putting is just a reserve for any unexpected expenses that may come up in the future for the fire fund. So for that particular fund, the fire fund, will have $51,000 that we can use possibly for future expenses.
Okay, I understand that, but it seems like the way you should pay back the water fund, before we talk about reserve.
So you rather pay off the water fund?
No, I'm paying back the money that's owed, the 158,000, to go back into the fire fund.
So you're saying the money should go back to the water fund because we borrowed it to pay for the fire fund? Is that what you're saying?
Money's in the, right.
Well, I mean, it's already budgeted for. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I see what you're saying. I definitely understand that. But as far as, using different funds to fund other funds, I mean, that's something we've always done, and I don't see why it would be any different to take less of that money and then kind of fund the reserve money with that. It's already been allocated for, if that makes sense.
It's already been allocated.
Right, so it's already been budgeted for that transfer money that we're transferring to the fire and foreign fund. I mean, it's already, it's already allocated. I don't really see why we would go back and put this 51,000 towards that.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how to do it. I mean, 158,000, if we had another money, should have went, to the fire fund anyway. It never been, taken out of the water fund.
But
So, I'm just, trying to get the scenario straight.
So, okay, if I understand this correctly, so the money that we borrow from the water fund to support the fire fund, correct? That's a done deal. The $51,000 is going to go to a reserve fund that will support the fire and floor fund in the future.
So, in other words, this is one operational transfer deal, so we're not.
Well, I mean, again, yes. However, but I mean, we have different funds that we borrow from as well, not just the fire fund. I mean, there's other funds that, so do we go and pay all those funds back and have no operational transfers? I don't think that's the best thing to do with $800,000. So this number here, all the way to the right, that'll be just for this year. And then as far as a long-term goal, we would love to get to that number that says, $3 million, that number, but that's a ways away. I mean, we're taking baby steps here.
The thing to keep in mind, that's a reserve for each fund to be set aside for emergency purposes. It's not there to be used, every time we need money. If we want to talk about the $158,000 that was transferred from the water fund into the fire fund, that was to balance the fire fund budget. Without that $158,000 from the water fund, the fire fund would have been at a deficit of the $158,000. That means we would not have been able to have a fire department. So then we would have to have a really hard conversation about what to do about a fire department. So if we want to, as a village, talk about what to do about having a fire department, that's our choice. We can say we want to have our own fire department as a volunteer paid on call fire department, and to make sure that we can support having that. If we need to take money from the water fund to do that, we consciously, and yes, we did agree to do that as a board. We did that when we approved this budget that included that operational transfer. Or if we said, no, that's something we cannot afford to do, we need to look at all other alternatives, then we would have, made a different decision when we approved the budget. But if you want to have that conversation, trustee, I think that's something we need to talk about and go down a different path, because that's what that would mean if we talk about taking that $158,000 and putting it back into the water fund out of the fire fund.
Okay, anything else on the cash reserve?
I do have another question, trustee. How do you envision this money being handled? Are we going to set up separate general ledger numbers that show that money with those numbers so that it kind of looks like it's restricted even though it really isn't? Within those funds, how is it going to be handled from a general ledger reporting perspective? And is the money going to be invested in some kind of a short-term investment vehicle so that we're getting some kind of a return on the money? Or is it just going to be sitting there idle? How are you going to handle that?
So as of right now, I think we're still talking over creating separate accounts. I don't think that's been finalized yet. I believe that we're going to talk with the auditors and get their opinion on what and how to move forward with that. No, the money will not be invested. I think we kind of want to keep it handy just in case. I know that's probably not the ideal thing to do with this amount of money, but I mean, as you know, we sometimes be running into some troubles and we kind of need money immediately. So I think that it will sit in the account we have, and we just track our expenses from it that way via a spreadsheet.
What I'm concerned about is, last year, budget
Trustee
year.
Brewer, please use the mic.
I'm sorry, the budget year from 2017 to 2018, there was a,
Oh, it might be working, man.
I ain't working.
Yeah, it sure ain't, 'cause we really can't hear you.
The cost, I think we were like $1 million overrun from the budget.
Right, because of the decrease in property taxes.
Right, okay, so we know we're $1 million in the hole. just speculate. And now you want to take a variety of different reserves to, I guess, do variety of duties and keep them in the funds. But we already $1 million in a hole, and it looks like we're going to have $800,000 more that you're going to put in reserves. It seems like to me that I don't understand why would you have a reserve when you're already $1 million in the hole. I mean, you could take this money and put it aside and put it something else, but you're still $1 million in the hole. So it's a little.
So the $800,000 is, I think it's needed. It's more of a savings. You can look at it like that way. So I understand that, we did have a deficit last year. However, we can't just say, okay, well, pay this $1 million back just because we have it, because then we will never have a savings. And so going forward, we'll be back in the same situation year after year after year. At some point, we have to just correct the issue, and I think this is a starting point. Anything else on cash reserve?
I just have something quick.
Sure.
You have in this paragraph, okay, it says, the finance department is responsible for monitoring these balances and informing the mayor of significant changes. I really think you have to include the board, because the board's cut out of certain things, and I think the board needs to be made aware as well.
Not a problem. Okay, we can move on to the cybersecurity policy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, did you say we're going to have line items, new line items established?
So we're still weighing the options on that. We're gonna talk with the auditors to see what's their advice and what's their opinion on that, and then we will let the board know.
Who was we?
Well, I guess it'll come from the mayor, or it'll come from. I'm pretty sure it'll come from the mayor. I'm pretty sure he'll relay the information to us.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, did you say something?
Well, she wanted to know, did you want to have this on the agenda for approval next week?
So if I add the part about the mayor and board to the reserve policy, is there anything that will prevent you guys from taking a vote on this for next week? Okay. So what I'll do is I'll add that to the change.
Sorry, I'm going to ask more questions. You have TBDs for the capital equipment replacement and the tech equipment replacement. Any idea when TBDs would be replaced with actuals? I mean, that's kind of a unknown realistically, so that just ends up being removed in effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, as of now, I mean, it's kind of like it doesn't exist. I mean, we're ways away from that. So that, yeah, you could just kind of, forget that that's even there pretty much.
One more thing, the difference between the 800,000 and I think the 1.3 million, you said that's going to be due with, sort of some expenses that we are.
Infrastructure repairs.
Okay, has that already been done?
No, so the mayor, he's going to give us a list from the department heads, and they'll come back to us with, I guess, some much needed repairs. And as a group, as a board rather, we'll go through and we'll decide of what we can and cannot do.
Okay.
I think I personally would like to see the list from the department heads and have us go through and look at those and agree what those are and see what we're going to spend versus what we have left before we say yay or nay to this.
Well, this has nothing to do with that.
Well, but it kind of all relates though, because we're talking about 1.3 is our starting point, and then what we spend off of their list is going to leave us with some lesser number, and then I think that lesser number really should be what our reserve is.
Okay, because I had them working within a certain amount,
Right.
and that's why they have to make that fit.
Right, 'cause I was gonna say
And
that.
and you know, it's not as if, because it's not a Christmas list, so they have to make it fit. Each department has to make it fit. Then they bring it back, and then once they got through, then I'll bring it to the board, because it's going to have to be appropriated. So anything that's got to be appropriated, the budget, quite actually, the board has to vote on it. So, but they have to make sure. I don't want to just have an open and say, okay, well, you can get what you want. It has to fit within a certain realm. And so that's why I was looking for them to be able to work with that and fit into that realm and still have just cash reserves for, and that's what, I was looking for. I'm not looking to make it whatever they would like to have or a wish. These are some of the things that we need. And quite naturally, once they get through, get the list, the board's going to get it, look at it, and get a chance to make comments, yay or nay on it.
Yeah, to the mayor's point, everything that's on the list is going to be a priority or need, and I think that we're just going to have to, come together and kind of decide on what exactly is most critical. Because if we just kind of give them a number to work with versus them giving us a number to work with, I can see how things can get out of hand a little bit.
So the reserve amount is flexible, is that what you're saying? It can be flexible?
Can it be? I mean, yes, but should it be? I mean,
Well-
we try to limit that.
Right, yeah, but, sometimes you might have to, so it could be flexible.
I think I heard the mayor say, no, it's not flexible. That's why I was asking.
And Roger just said it is.
No,
You said it could be.
the difference in what's left after the 800,000 versus the 1.3 is what they have to work with as department heads. So, I mean, there are some things that have to be done. It's going to cost some money. I mean, when I say have to be, I mean really has to be done within the next few months. And there's some things they have to live with. So I don't want to open it up and say, well, you can get what you want. And, it's basically things that have been needed in the village for over 6, 7, 8 years. So this is a one-time, well, I'm hoping that's not a one-time, but we actually was able to sell this land and get the money, so I don't want to just use it for, I want to make sure that what we use it for, that we take our time to spend the money, not just, we have it and we can just go ahead and do what we need to do, what we want to do with it. So it's going to be a need basis, and they're going to have to put some thought in it. And they're going to have to really evaluate what it is that they really, really need versus what they would like to have.
Roger, I have, for the motor fuel tax, and you notice in here on the back page, it has $200,000 transferred. Isn't that the normal amount that we generally transfer every year? I mean, yeah. And 50% of it
To the
for
motor
the
fuel,
reserve?
to the motor fuel tax fund.
Yeah, so we actually not doing anything for the motor, because it's 50% anyway. It's 200,000 anyway from the motor fuel tax.
What you saying that we transfer 200,000, or you saying is that the budget number is $200,000?
It's just what it generally is every year, $200,000.
So this year,
So, but we're gonna take $67,000 for the reserve, right? This is what we're putting in the reserve.
correct, 67,000.
So, but we taking $200,000 from money we have already, granted or spent or something, that's in the budget, okay, that we generally use every year, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Right, so the 200,000.
Okay.
Right, so the 200. Wait, oh, so did I ask you a question? I did.
Yeah, you saying yeah, and I'm saying yeah,
Oh, okay.
and I'm agreeing with you.
Okay. Okay, moving on.
Okay.
So the other policy that was brought before the board was the cybersecurity policy.
So did we answer the clerk's question about putting it on the agenda for next week?
I think that we can put it on the agenda for next week. So I was supposed to have a meeting, committee meeting, along with, and Jared was supposed to come last Wednesday. He could not make it, so whatever changes or recommendations we decide to make tonight, I would like to bring that back to him, let him take a review at it, and then we can kind of vote on it. So this does not have to be something we can vote on next week. I'll kind of like, want to review with him, make sure he's kosher with it. So the cybersecurity policy is something that we've never had in place before, but due to recent threats and just a standard practice among most companies nowadays and businesses, you have to have some kind of policy. So this is something that we've kind of come up with. So I guess we could just start with anybody have any questions on this.
Well, the first question is the cost. We talk about upgrading really some software. And I know this is policy, but, do we have any idea how much this is going to cost?
So this is just a policy that based on what we already have. I don't think there's any cost associated with putting together or implementing this policy. It's just pretty much it's just a policy that we have. It's nothing. There's no cost to this.
Trustee Grant, as I go through here and look at the cyber policy, which is a really good, I guess it's a start, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
A portion of this policy has everything to do with not FOIA requests, but information. A lot of the information here you indicated it has a red, green, white, black level. However, who makes the determination well, I see now it is by the mayor, but shouldn't that be the mayor and the trustees?
Yeah, so it should be the mayor. However, the trustees, we're really not handling, the day-to-day. So it's not our job to say, okay, well, the finance director should have this access. That's something that falls under him.
Say that again.
So we shouldn't say, okay, the finance director gets this access, or the fire chief gets this access, or so on and so forth. That doesn't fall under us. That's like day-to-day as far as employees, so that falls under him.
Well, wait a minute. According to Sauk Village Code, any trustees have access to any documents in the village.
No, I never said they didn't.
Okay.
You asked about employees.
Okay.
Are you asking as far as trustees go?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I think that we should come up with what access trustees should have as a group. I don't want to just throw one out there and say this is what we have, because that's just not the right way to do it. I think that trustees should have most access, but they shouldn't have the highest level as far as that we don't need to have the same amount of access as such as a juror would have as an IT consultant.
From a legal aspect, there's some place in here that shows they could get documents and like if, say for instance, a resident want to get a document or something, they should be able to pull that off of the cyber policy.
If a resident wanted a document?
Right, okay, I'm looking at it, the way I'm looking at it is that the attorney has the, for FOIA requests, you have to turn over certain documents, okay? Certain documents have to be turned over by the attorney, okay? Those should have some kind of priority for them.
So any FOIA request that process won't change at all, and I don't see how this shouldn't affect that policy. It shouldn't affect FOIA requests at all. That's totally separate. So I think the process is going to be the same. It goes to the FOIA clerk, And if the attorney needs to get involved, he'll submit what he needs to submit to the FOIA clerk, and the FOIA clerk will give it back to the resident, whoever made the request, or the FOIA. That has nothing to do with this, pretty much.
Okay, what about financial documents?
So as far as a FOIA request, or just asking for
No.
something?
Finance, you know, when we need financial records.
So we'll have access to some read-only documents, I'm sure, that we can get to. Nothing that we could possibly change or manipulate, but I don't see why we wouldn't have access to certain financial records.
Yeah, trustee, as you and I were talking earlier about this, I was asking about the fact that this really doesn't speak to trustee access and what we do and don't have access to. It's really about, it seems like it's more focused around employees as it's written. So I think it does need to have something added about the board and what our access should be as well. And also about what Gerald's access should be, because when I look at the user categories, I think that he's got access to everything right now, and that might be appropriate, it might not be, right? So we probably need to figure that out as well. And then there's little bits of feedback that I've shared with you that we can just, make those notes and for the board's benefit, the rest of the board's benefit, on page 4 under the acceptable use, paragraph 1, section 6.1, each login attempt should prevent a user with a sign-on message with respect to authorized use, misuse, and the monitoring of all activity takes place. If that's not something that happens today, I don't think we need to worry about changing that. I think it's probably more appropriate to make sure that that's included in the employee manual. That way, to Trustee Brewer's point, we're not incurring costs with code changes to make sure that when there's a login, that there's a little pop-up box that says that. It's, again, this is making sure that the employees are aware of that. It's not like it needs to be in their face every single time they sign on, but it's an awareness as part of being an employee in the village. So I think in the manual would be sufficient. In that next paragraph, it's, talking about passwords and IDs, and I think the point of that is that we just need to be clear with everybody that passwords should never be shared. That's standard security protocol for any organization, and in most places it's grounds for termination. On page 6, under section 7.1, user system and network access, normal user identification, we're talking about the system would automatically lock after 15 minutes of inactivity. I felt that that was too long. It should be after a couple of minutes. And actually, the other thing that I asked Trustee Grant to add to this is that anytime someone steps away from their workstation, they should be required to lock their computer so that no one can access the information on the computer. Because if they leave it open and unlocked, then somebody else could walk up and access and do something to the information that's available on the screen. I think that was the bulk of what I had.
So I think the next step for this will be to figure out what access, go through it again in the near future, and then possibly pass it, we'll vote on a later date.
Are you through? Okay. Next item. Madam Clerk, electioneering canvassing, literature distribution policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in November, in fact, November the 6th, 2017, I submitted to each of you, each of the trustees as well as you, an inter-office memo asking about a policy for election canvassing. And I stated then that it would be very helpful to me to have for us to have an actual policy that governs us. And as the election official for the village, I thought that it would ease the path if we had established an exact process. I shared back then also that this has been a question that has been brought forth for the last few years, and each year it just falls by the wayside. And from my understanding, the village has been operating under a gentleman's agreement all of these years, but then it gets muddled from time to time. So I would just ask again that we develop a policy for what we can, what we cannot do, where we can do it within the municipal center, the senior center, the community center. If I'm not mistaken, a while back, the community center had some language in their application towards this, but I'm not certain if it is in the new system as well as if it's in the policy for the senior center. So even though I dropped it in November after it seemed as if there was no interest between you or the trustees, I am bringing it back to you again because I think that it could save us a lot of headaches down the line if people, our residents, visitors, candidates that visit us, if they know exactly what's permissible and what is not. It's better to have something established in writing as a protective mechanism opposed to making things up as we go along. So what I am asking you, Mr. Mayor, as well as the trustees, to consider allowing me or someone to develop a policy for the village where election canvassing is concerned.
Okay, well, I'll ask the Ordinance Review Committee to come up with a draft. First of all, check to see if there's anything in the records for. Okay, just talking to Trustee Todd. If there's anything in there that there may be something like that. If not, then to come up with a present the board with some type of policy, at least a blueprint outline, and then we can go from there.
Trustee Todd, and I'm going to save you some time for the research because when I presented this memo to you, November the 6th, 2017, I had already conducted the research, and that's how I was able to determine, and I brought to you the minutes from October the 14th, 2014, which was the last time that anything was in the minutes to discuss.
I'll have to check because I don't remember getting it, but I will check.
Check, thank you.
Okay, so you can bring that back then. The next item, is that all that you have?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Trustee Brewer, security cameras?
Well, the, what's on the agenda is not right. It's not security cameras, it's security plexiglass. I think that's what you call them. This was also done back in October 19, or October and either November 2017, where we requested that some security plexiglass be installed into the front office. It's my understanding that this has been discussed by the safety committee, and also Union did propose some different items that we could get in order to secure the office out in front. Apparently that hasn't been done, so I need to would like somebody to go back, or whoever handles that, and find out what's the status of getting some security plexiglass up there for the front office. It hasn't been done. It has to need to be, go back and take a look at it. But this time, that's the end of that.
Okay, I talked to Kevin about that. They had the measurements in. I don't know what the holdup is, but you're right. The union had made a request. The employees went to the union and they came to us about it. So we're just waiting. I'm just waiting to find out what's the holdup about installation. So as soon as I find out, I will let and inform the board the status, and I'll check on that tomorrow. Civic system upgrade proposal. Trustee Grant.
All right, so the civic software that we currently have is what we use to handle all our village finances. We currently have a system that's a couple of versions old, and we kind of want to get up to date. So we have an opportunity to possibly upgrade. And so there's some couple of, so I gave you guys a handout, and it kind of goes through, who kind of civic system is and how do they get, kind of like what they do. Then it kind of drops down to our current limitations. So these limitations are something that pretty much the finance, people who handle the finances kind of all agree with, that are not good for, or they could all be better. So we have like a lack of, for example, a lack of audit trails. We have a lack of management reporting, some control reports, the ability to not upload information quickly. It's kind of like a manual process to do that. Training, ability to scan invoices and things of the nature. So there's a few limitations that we currently have that pretty much everybody agrees with, and that we're a few years behind, and we kind of want to update. So there is, if we decide to move forward with this process, there is a 4-month process to this. When a month, we kind of have to establish a set start date, and then 2, we have to test some data out, make sure that all the data we load is correct and that everything is working properly. And then we have a few months of training if we decide to move forward. When it comes to a contract period, yes, we will sign an initial 1-year contract. But then going forward, it's not like a 1 year again. It kind of is like an agreement that there's no another contract signed. It's kind of like a mutual agreement that we will continue on with the service. And then we get to a point where we kind of have to talk and determine whether we want to go with what's called a hosted versus a non-hosted environment. And basically, the way I kind of explain this is that hosted is something that the civic will hold all the liability, versus non-hosted is something that we will kind of hold that liability for anything that happens. Maybe what if we have like a power outage, a virus, or things of that nature? We're responsible for all the software updates ourselves, versus letting civic themselves do all that stuff. That's called hosted, and that comes with a price, which I have listed on pages 4 and 5, or 4 rather. So there is a comparison of the two costs. So on page 4, for example, the top one is the non-hosted, and the bottom one is the hosted. So we're looking at an 8-year lifespan of this cost here. And the reason why we say 8 years is because the average hardware on the computer can kind of last 8 years before it should be replaced. So we just kind of use that 8-year period as a time frame. So overall, over the course of the 8 years, if we go non-hosted, we expect to spend $132,000 versus $132,000 in total. Versus if we go hosted, we'll expect to spend $139,000. So there's roughly a difference of about $7,000 between the two, hosted versus non-hosted. And we kind of, both hosted has their pros and cons, which I have listed here on page 3. So there's a few pros and cons there we can kind of read through and go through and figure out. Now, we're not making a declaration that we go with hosted. I think that's something we should talk about as a board and figure out what's best for us. and then also kind of run it by Gerald, who is on board or who seems to approve of that we should have an update to our current civic system. So on page 5 here, we have a comparison of, again, hosted versus non-hosted. And what that does is it shows us, if we do decide to move forward with this, how we would have to amend the budget by these specific amounts that's listed in order to pay for the program. So, for example, year 1, if we could decide to do hosted, we would have to amend the budget by $17,000. If we decide to do the non-hosted version, we will have to amend the budget by $25,000 because we didn't account for this in the budget. The only thing that was accounted for in the budget this year was the fact of the annual maintenance that we already pay for the civic system. So if you look at, again, page 4 and 5, it'll kind of break out year by year how much we decide, how much we will pay, and pretty much the breakdown of what we exactly are paying from civic itself to IT support, to maintenance, to hardware costs, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not something that needs to be voted on next week. This is something that we should have another discussion on after everybody had a chance to kind of go through the materials, and then we can decide to vote on it or whether we can move forward or not in the future.
Trustee Grant and I were talking through this together as he was working on this. One of the really nice things about doing a hosted environment is the fact that you're keeping up with the upgrades as the vendor makes the upgrades, versus if you go with the hosted, or the non-hosted, sorry, you're buying the software, the release at the time. And so 8 years down the road, if you look at the numbers, you know, on that chart there, you still at the end of that year 8 have the same software version that you purchased today 8 years down the road, versus if you have gone with the hosted version of the package, you have the version 8 years down the road that they have, not the 2018 version. So even though it's a $7,000 more out of pocket over the lifetime of those 8 years, you're actually better off, in my opinion, having gone with the hosted solution. And I know, you know, the two of us have been playing with this a little bit longer than the rest of you, so you haven't had a chance to digest any of the information yet. So to his point, it's too soon to be talking about making a decision on this, but it's probably best to look at it and reach out to him with questions as you come up with them, while they're fresh in your minds as you read through the information here, to get those answered.
Are there any questions so far on this?
Yeah.
Is Civic Systems, is that the name of the company?
So that is the name of the company who started it, yes. And so, but like Baker Tilly started the company, but Civic is the name of the software. Yes.
So are you looking to bring this back in 2 weeks to the committee?
Yes. In 2 weeks, yes, we can bring it back to the committee. Everybody has a chance to read it, look it over, and then I'd like to have a recommendation on whether we want to go with hosted versus non-hosted at that time.
Okay.
Excuse me, Gerald's gonna do, he's gonna make the determination, hosted or not hosted?
No.
But we just make the bid himself?
We will make the determination. And that's all I have.
Okay. Next item, we'll switch it, so we're gonna go with public comment at this point. I need to get a mic up there. All questions and comments will be directed to the mayor. Each speaker may comment on the matter pertaining to the business of Sauk Village. Each speaker is allowed one opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. and may not engage in debate or counter discussions or personal matters. Please come up and state your name.
Judy Gast here. Some time ago, I was up here and I discussed several things, one of which was the termination of Sherry Jasinski. And at that time, I told you, Derek, that we had we knew exactly what your next step was going to be, and that was to get rid of Mohan and put the treasurer in his place. And as of yesterday, I see that that is exactly what was done. And I have a few questions on that. You jumped the gun. You've got somebody in there who is not bonded and cannot be bonded at this time. The insurance for the village will go through the same system that they do for bonding to cover her. It isn't going to happen. From today on, if she transfers any money without being bonded, you've got a problem. We have a big issue, and we're not going to let it sit, as far as the fact that you brought 4 people. When you came into office, you brought 4 people in. It never hit this board. They never agreed to anything. You've given people raises, took money away from people. It never came to the board, and it's supposed to. The people of the village are not being told what's going on. We don't know. You've got $1 million check, and where's that money going? Well, little by little, we're hearing some of the things, and we're still not hearing things as they're happening. We feel that if you can't be transparent, then we have to dig and find solutions to the problem, or find out exactly what's going on and what things are. And that's how we found out that everything that you've done so far has not been brought to this board. And Mr. Grant, in talking about the trustees and the money and where they stand with the money, for 8 long years, I listened to Derek Burgess scream up there at other mayors that the trustees have total control of the money. You say what checks can be cashed. You say what can or cannot be done when it comes to the money. So there should be no question as what do the trustees find out and what don't they find out, what can they find out, what can't they find out. Every trustee has a right to know where every penny goes. It's our tax money.
Time's up, Ms. Cat.
My time's up? Okay. My last words to you are, I also said, and you and the chief disagreed with me, that this village has a high crime rate. If you check with the state of Illinois, Sauk Village is listed as high crime rate. We also had another shooting Sunday and a victim.
Good evening. My name's Carl Correct, and I've been living in, I'm sorry. My name's Carl Correct, and I've been living in this village for 32 years. And just to piggyback on what she's saying about the crime rate, I got certain areas where I don't allow them to go to because of the crime rate that's going on, even across the street from me, what they're doing. From what they're doing across the street, it's crazy. You call the police, and if they come, you gotta call them 2 or 3 times to come addressing the issues that you might have. It don't make no sense. You're selling dope, nobody's doing nothing about it. And I do mean nothing. So, you know, they're walking in the streets, and they look at you like you're the victim, or that you're the problem because you're driving your car in the street.
That's right.
So we need to be aware that there is crime going on in the village, and that they need to post that there's crime going on. Lock your car doors. They stole my car July 10th out of my driveway. You did nothing about it as of yet. So am I upset? Yes, I'm upset. So would I recommend anybody moving to the village? No. Thank you.
Sir, what area were you talking? You don't have to give me your address. What area were you talking about?
Where I live at?
Yes, sir. This area. Pardon me?
I live on Galen.
Galen? Okay.
My name is Pat Couch. I'm really not sure what I'm going to say because I hadn't thought through this thoroughly, but I'm very disappointed in all of this board and this mayor. For years, I watched him sit here counting fly specks, I guess, up on the ceiling. Now the things have gotten so bad. We thought we had had bad issues prior, but this has become the worst administration I think this village has ever seen. We've asked numerous times for reports. We can stand here and ask, and you never bother to tell us an answer. That's okay. But we need to know how many fire hydrants are not working in this village. We've asked numerous times. You don't bother to tell anybody. We'd like to know. It should be a report that somebody can get up and give us a report. How many fire hydrants are working, not working, parts ordered, not ordered? When is it going to be fixed? When are the rest of the trees going to be cut down that are falling down across the streets? The limbs are half laying in the street now. Some of this stuff needs to be addressed. But then you let go another employee without knowledge of your board. That's ridiculous. But that's the way this administration seems to run things. Don't tell your board. You're all sitting here. Maybe some of them know, maybe they don't. I don't know, but that's asinine.
Linda Washington. First of all, I just want to say I think it is a travesty that you all let Mohan go and just fired him for absolutely no reason. Mohan did not do anything that I'm sure warranted what you guys did to him. It just makes absolutely no sense that you treat employees the way that you do. But it's going to come back. Karma is real, whether you believe it or not. Second of all, I want to talk about all of the rhetoric in regard to the Dr. Linda Washington Foundation. I don't care what you think about my foundation. We passed out over 400 book bags in spite of you all telling the businesses not to give to the book bag giveaway. It was a great success. The parents was pleased, the students was happy, and 400 students walked down these streets the first day of school with a brand new book bag on their back with supplies that the Dr. Linda Washington Foundation and the volunteers and the sponsors that did give, and many of them wanted to stay anonymous for fear of being harassed at their businesses and talked about for giving to the back to school book bag to me. You know, it's just so childish to me, but I don't expect nothing less because that's how the people that you have around you, Mayor Burgess, are. I have came and I have talked to you about it before. Your wife, Juanita, and your economic development director, no, not excuse me, I can talk about anything I want to talk about for 3 minutes, and I will. Call the police and have me taken out. I'm not going to stop talking. You need to get your people in line, and any of them that's writing about me on Facebook, their name is on Facebook. They're not supposed to be on Facebook. That is the ordinance, and you are not doing nothing about it because you don't care nothing about it. Others have came up here and told you the same things with pictures and diagrams, and you still continue it to happen. Now, when you talk about my foundation and put my board members down and talk about people that's in my organization, I don't
Okay.
care nothing about how you all feel about us passing our book bags. But I'm gonna tell you one thing, that $1 million, you better keep some to the side to give these parents book bags next year, because I'm all over this community, letting them know. And they saw the video where you said on there, I am not gonna pass out book bags, and I will not be passing out school supplies. So third of all, I wanna talk about how on,
Yeah, that's what she's doing.
I would never be intimidated, and I'm not going anywhere. I don't care how much you all talk or don't talk or circulate things about me and my foundation to talk about with a job you feel that we didn't do, and how the parents were so upset. You are liars. Any parent that didn't want that book back, tell them to bring it back. I got several more waiting to get it. I don't have a problem with Faith Church. You're not going to bring the tension between me and churches and me and other residents for your own personal agenda and your own personal ploy on Facebook. Your workers doing work hours. It's
Dr. Washington, your time is up.
Thank you. I'll be back many more weeks.
I asked you not to get personal. I asked you not
It's
to.
all personal. All my business is personal.
But you want somebody
And I don't
you
care.
want someone to respect you.
You don't. You don't.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I will not, as long as you do that, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You don't respect me. And I'm not going to.
Kathy Betcher, I would like to know why was Mohan let go?
That's, as I stated before.
I know you don't.
I will not
You
talk
don't
about, okay,
talk
so
about-
why ask that question?
Okay. Because I want it on record that
Oh,
I asked
okay.
why. The other
And it
thing
wasn't
is-
the board that made that decision.
I know it wasn't. I
Okay, it
know
was
very
me.
well it was not the board that
Okay,
made
so
that
it was
decision.
stated that the board made the decision. It was not. It was-
No, the board did not make that
Well,
decision.
that's
You
what was
did.
stated.
Now, the other thing is, you had 3 other people that you could let go very easily, that should be let go.
That's
I'm not
true.
going to say their names.
That's
I'm not going to get personal, but there are 3 people under your administration.
Excuse me.
I can talk over her. I don't
Excuse me,
care.
because the reason why I'm saying, Ms. Belcher, I mean, it is really rude. Now, you asked me not to interrupt anything that you're saying, but why do you want to sit in the back room and make statements like that?
Because
I
I'm
mean-
probably just sick of all of y'all. That's
Then fine, keep that to yourself.
No, I'm not going to keep it to myself. I'm going to tell it to the whole wide world.
Go ahead, Ms.
Why don't
Belcher.
you make me?
Go ahead, Ms. Belcher.
No, you can't.
Okay.
None of y'all can.
Go ahead, Ms. Belcher.
So, this is more directed to Marva's statement about the political. And you know I was over at the school board yesterday because one of my cards was in the book bags. It was put there because I donate of myself for the kids in this village. I donate money and time. And I was going to run for school board to help these children. If the parents were upset that my card was in that book bag, they really need to rethink things because Dr. Leak gets paid a salary and the school board sits up there and makes all kind of rulings, and the scores that these children are getting is appalling. For shame that they're ashamed, they're upset about my card being in there. What they should be ashamed of is the way their children,
1 minute.
I know I've got 1 minute,
But-
is the way their children, no, the way their children are being taught.
This-
They're lucky they can read and write. For shame.
This is not the school board, Ms. Belcher. Okay, but this is not the school board. And we're not gonna sit here and go back and forth because you have an audience.
You're bringing it up.
No.
I had my audience last week.
But you brought it up, Ms. Belcher, as far as the school board. We're not talking
It's
about.
Betcher, thank you.
Okay. Kathy.
I usually don't do this, but I have to. I am Tammy Jones. I am school board president at the current time. And yes, our scores are hideous. And yes, my heart is broken. And yes, we are doing many things to make a difference. But what you will not do is talk about those children. Do not disrespect the children. Talk about the parents, talk about the school board members, talk about the superintendent. Drag us till you can't drag us no more. But you leave every last one of them babies out of your mouth.
We're not gonna go back and forth.
Look on mouth. Cause 2 of those come on me. And they get a damn good job. And what's this year? You wretched ass. Yeah, wretched. To stand here and talk about a child. You are wretched. You are wretched.
Miss Kathy, Miss Belcher,
I didn't believe so.
You did that.
Miss Belcher.
Yes, you did. And for that, you are so wrong. So wrong.
Oh, you're so wrong.
Excuse me, before you go any further, if we cannot control each other, and if we're gonna go back and forth like that, it's not a meeting anymore. Now it's become an free-for-all. I will not preside over free-for-all. So if it continues, I will ask for an adjournment. Yes, ma'am. I said yes, ma'am.
My name is Bernadine Hopkins. I have a couple of questions. I'm kind of going to be all over the place. Okay. I wanted to know, will the reserve be put in an interest-bearing account, and who would have specific control? The other thing I'd like to know is who are some of the administrators that would have control also over these funds, what did you call it, 1.3 million, as well as when you start dividing it up and you have this 8, whatever it was, in reserve. I just want to know who's going to be in charge of that, and I'm hoping that it's more than just one individual.
That door has to stay open, sir.
Individual.
Go ahead.
Okay, the other thing I don't understand is see, I don't get this. If I go and take my mortgage and I go and put it in the bank, what that means is that my mortgage is still due. So what I don't understand is how can you have debts and yet you're considering placing money in a reserve? Seems like to me you should be paying them bills. But, okay, maybe you can explain it. Let's see. The other thing, now, y'all might get a little mad at me, but it seems like to me these policies that Trustee Grant is presenting, this whole thing seems incomplete. You all have numerous questions, but yet you agreed to allow it to be placed on the agenda to be voted on. But it sounds very incomplete. The trustees have been left out. There were some other terms I noticed too also, that this operational transfers, that term has been bandied about, but I have yet to hear that that is actually a legitimate term. So, you know, I would like to know if that is a legitimate term. And the other thing, finally, is this, the bonding of the treasurer. I understand that you said that the village insurance, you all have enough village insurance, but what you may not know is this. Depending on what kind of action, and I hate to say it, but should there be fraud or something like that, or misappropriation of funds, your insurance could possibly decide not to cover that. And that is exactly what a treasurer bond is I think it's called a security bond for a treasurer is for. You may want to rethink that, especially with your 1 point whatever coming in and the various spots that it's being placed in and things like that. So maybe you could answer some of those questions and give me some clarity on some other things. Thank you.
First of all, I couldn't write that quick, but so I'll just tell you this. As far as the trustees being left out of the equations, that's not true.
I didn't say that, sir.
You said the trustees are left out. So the trustees are not left out of any decisions. And as far as the money is concerned, the trustees vote the money in and out. Yes, they do. They have accounts payable. Every other week we have accounts payable. Trustees vote the money in and out, or up or down, however you want to call it. So no, we don't spend money frivolously and just spend it. The trustees see the accounts payable. They have questions. They vote on it. They say yay or nay. I didn't write all the other things down, but as far as bonding, we went through that, I don't know how many different times, I don't know what it is I need to get to you to let you know, but there's no way in the world we could have anybody dealing with money and not be properly bonded, insured, or anything to that nature. That would not happen. We have too many things in place, too much money that would be changing hands. The government would
So
come.
are you saying she is bonded? Is that what you're saying? She is bonded, is that what you're saying? I just wanted clarity.
No, but you're asking questions after the fact. I'm trying to answer your question. There's no way that a person could be transacting business, or the treasurer at the time, when the time was insured with a surety bond. Now, I'm sure that someone has told you about it, and you can look it up, and I'm not going to, I've explained it I don't know how many different times. But again, there's no way that a government entity could do business without the person being properly insured. And as far as, I'm trying to think what you just said about taking money or whatever the case may be,
No, I said it should draw.
misappropriation
Right,
of
should that
funds. That's checks and balances, and you know we have safeguards against that. You have a board, we have people. It's not that's not gonna now. I'm not gonna say it cannot happen, but right now, no, it's not gonna happen. I mean, you got too many people watching the money. The money is in the bank right now, so. And there's more, you know, so as far as the check that everyone talks about, that check has been in the bank ever since we got it.
But
So
who has access?
it's not sitting at their house.
Who has access is what I asked.
Who has
That was one of
access?
my-
Whoever has access.
To those funds, is it specifically
The
you,
board,
the treasurer?
when the board votes the money out, we extract the money out of the bank. Someone else will get it.
I need a copy of these minutes.
I don't do it for you.
Heidi Parker. There are people watching the money. A few weeks ago, I gave everyone a copy of CN funds that were expended within 4 months, about $60,000. You provided to the Attorney General documents which included surveys, permit applications, applications for the money, but no invoices. There are 10 invoices missing. Would you please explain to me how you can pay an invoice when you don't have it? But there's a check. That's my first thing. I also would like to talk about the reserve money. You're moving money from the border fund into reserve, or from all kind of other funds. Don't look at me like that.
Because we haven't moved anything, I don't know what
But you're planning on it.
I'm planning on leaving here in a few minutes. I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
So I can't go by what's planning on, ma'am.
What my question, my point is to Trustee Supan. If there's $158,000 that the fire department needs, why was that not budgeted? Why does it have to come from the water fund? Why do we have to close the fire department? Because there's no money. Wasn't it budgeted with money that's coming in?
Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead and finish, because I mean.
As long as you're spending money from the water fund, I don't even think how you can think about Lake Michigan water, because you're never going to be able to do that. My last point is about the school bags.
This is not the school board, ma'am.
It has nothing to do with the school board. It's concerning the drive for the school bags. There was nothing ever on any Facebook page supporting it, asking for donations, asking to help out. But as soon as the school bags were given out, there were complaints. There was a letter postally placed into those book bags, and I'm sure nobody looked at them. That's my point.
Again, and I'm not going to keep going through that. This is the village board. This is not the school district. Oh, you don't want to answer? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I know who put it up.
I was gonna give you an answer on the invoice for CM because you have got the other invoices that you requested. So to say that you didn't get that.
There's 10 missing. There's 10 invoices missing. It's on accounts payables. There's checks, but no invoices.
Go ahead.
Mary Escobedo. Yeah, it's me again. So I see Joe Izzawadi is still here. You were given an ordinance, all you board members were given the ordinance that he should be terminated. He should not be doing that stuff on social media. You might also want to look into a policy for harassment. Anyway, in that line, so last week I got an email from LinkedIn where an economic development specialist had been into my profile. So again, I had to go to my HR department because since the harassment and the attacks have been on me with social media, I've been showing them all that, so they all have that, so they know. Every time I get a question, how old are these people? And I said, too old to know any better. Anyway, so I had to take down my linked page so that he would stop harassing me, because obviously he's obsessed with me. I'm not sure what he's looking for, but I have a diploma. I got my job on my credentials. I didn't have a friend who made the spouse give me a job. So I got it on my own. I don't know what he knows, what he wants, but Joe, I made more than you. Yes, I do. Since it was put out on Facebook, again, my HR department has that as well. So, I mean, I don't know what he's looking for, but I think you need to tell him to stop harassing me, because again, I had to take my page down. And for you 4 trustees who are not doing anything about it, you were all given a copy of the ordinance. 2 of you were elected, and obviously you're not doing anything for the residents, so obviously you're not planning to come back. And the other 2 you were put in only because Derek knew that you would be saying yes, and when he ran and you didn't win, 1 minute, so obviously I'm guessing you neither will be coming back, because the residents are watching you bobbing every time Derek says, bye.
Okay, Joe, comments from the Board of Trustees. Trustee Brewer?
Yeah, one more.
Where they at? Oh, okay.
And the crime in Sauk Village is horrible. Lisa Petner. The crime in Sauk Village is horrible. We have drug dealers sitting right outside the front of the house. My mother is subject to these things. Shootings on Sunday. The call center is sending people to incorrect addresses, hanging up on individuals. Me as one of them. Children walking in the streets in groups of 5 to 6. I said, excuse me, you all should walk on the sidewalk so you don't get hit. Well, I'll throw a brick through your window. And today on my walk, I came across 2 dogs, pit bulls, loose. Sauk Village is not safe. That's all I have to say.
Trustee Brewer.
Here's, pass this down. So maybe I need to pass them all. this morning, Rosen Sturp and Mike McGrath, the memo was sent to him. It talks about Mohan and how he was dismissed. I haven't got a response back from Olson and Sturps yet, but I think it's gonna take a while to answer. But the bottom line that I want residents to know is that Mohan can't be fired without a hearing. It's a matter of law. The hearing must take place in the public. It's also common knowledge that it cannot be taken during a board meeting. I'm aware that certain officials can work around this issue in order to get Mohan out, which we already seen he's already done. So I've asked for written legal guidance on what's going to happen with Mohan, because as of this day, according to what I know to the law, no, Mohan is not fired. But however, he has been taken out of the office, which I think was really just, blacked out, which was really just upsetting to me, because this is the second time this has happened to a resident and to an employee. It's ridiculous. Somebody should have some kind of guidelines on what we should do. The mayor and the board know that you have to, there are certain things that you have to do, there are certain procedures that you have to take in order to get an employee out of here. But for some reason, the mayor thinks he could just take them out at your leisure. It's going to cost us money. Anytime you don't follow the law, it costs you money. That's something you got to know. And we should know it's going to cost us money. I can't say that enough. For somebody to get dismissed for another employee, and nothing's going to be done to them, and it's going to cost us money, it's a little ridiculous. So with that being said, the memos is at Olson. He's going to give us some kind of feedback on what's going on with here. If he says nothing, that's fine. We can go on. We could live. But somebody needs to know something. You just don't let employees go without saying something to them. It's just not right. It's morally wrong in itself. So I'm waiting patiently for a response from the attorney, and we can just see. If he says nothing, that's fine. We have to go further, because there's no reason why employees should be just taken out of here with handcuffs, and this is the second person that has them too, without somebody saying something to anybody about why they got dismissed. Nothing's been said to us. Trustees don't even know what's going on. It's not right. As simple as that. I don't understand, and I hate to say this, but why are the trustees here? Why? So that's the end of my report.
Trustee Dupont? Trustee Grant? Trustee Tate? Trustee Todd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment. As I sit here and I listen to the residents, and you talk about the board, and I got it. But I want you to understand what happened yesterday was never brought before the board. I have to hear it on the street that we've let an employee go. And I felt, Mr. Mayor, that you should have the common courtesy to alert the board of what you're doing. Because now we have to hear it on the street. And when they talk about open and transparent, no. There's certain things we don't know. I have to find it out on the street. And I don't think that's right. This board here is for a reason. We're here for the residents. I can't help the residents because I don't know what's going on. And so I'd like to apologize because I had no idea that our finance director is no longer with us. And I felt you should have the common courtesy. The same when you did when this was with Ms. Jasinski. I don't care how you slice and dice it. I've consolidated the department. Nah, I don't think that's exactly what happened. Just by what I was reading. You never come before the board with this. At least say what you're doing, so that we don't have to hear it on the street. And that ends my comment.
Trustee, first of all, I did inform the clerk yesterday when the action was taken to inform the board of the action that I took. She disseminated that to each and every trustee, so to say you didn't know it until after the fact, I'm sorry, because the clerk assured me, and I think it was like 10 o'clock when she actually disseminated the information. So I don't know where that came from.
I'm going to stop you right there because you don't like to go back and forth. This is what we got yesterday. Not that our finance director was released and no longer working for the village. It says that Judy Suffin was going to be an interim finance director. That's what it said. We were not notified that Mohan was let go. And that's the email that I have.
Oh, I did tell the clerk. Are you gonna let me finish, or you just? I'll take a motion to adjourn. I'll accept the motion to adjourn. So move second. So move by second. All in favor? Thank you.
Just need to tell the truth, that's all.